Good day everyone, I am Prince Clarence Lipogpog from the Group 1. This presentation is subjected to talk about all about in the Psych 101, which is understanding the self. Disclaimer, this is only for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor Mr. Roldan Ardines to use this as an educational material. The presentation we're going to talk about is the self from the perspective from the various philosophers who are in the Greek ancient triumvirate, who are Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and we're also going to talk about the medieval philosophy, which is from the St. Augustine and Anthony de Mello. The learning objectives of this presentation is to know the various philosophers' perspective about self, and also aims to develop the students' fundamental self-recognition with the learnings provided, and also aims to refine one's personal philosophy, and lastly, it also aims to demonstrate the various philosophical views on the self. The first one we're going to talk about is the self-perspective of philosopher Socrates. The self from the perspective of philosopher Socrates. The Greek philosopher Socrates was a scholar, teacher, and a philosopher. He was famously known for his method of questioning as the Socratic method. Through his journey being a philosopher, Socrates realized that philosophy must obtain practical results for the greater well-being of society. The first step of his realization of his goal is the acquisition of wisdom through knowing oneself. Socrates viewed the concept of self through the philosopher's take on the soul. Socrates' concept of the soul should not be viewed from the vantage point of Christianity. Ultimate wisdom comes from the knowing oneself, according to Socrates. The Greek lived long before the existence of Christianity, so that Socrates, the concept of soul, did not have the same religious connotations that it has for us today. The Greek philosopher Socrates refers to the soul as the intellectual and moral personality of humans. According to Socrates, the soul is the essence of human person, and he refers the soul as the self. The Greek philosopher urges us to take care of our soul to attain good life, which is his ultimate goal in his philosophy. The human person must see that her life is geared towards knowledge of the good life. According to Socrates, that the good life is being wise and virtuous. It can be obtained by acquisition of knowledge, wisdom, and virtue. Socrates tells us that knowing oneself is also attaining a good life. To have a good life, we need examine to our life. Socrates convinced that the human person can discover the truth, which he refers the truth for good life. He refers the truth as the person who knows when he or she thinks is the right thing to do. Thinking and doing what is the right thing to do is the truth for good life, and that doing evil is the ignorance of truth. Knowing what is right is doing what is right, according to Socrates. On the contrary to the opinion masses, oneself, according to Socrates, is not identified with that what we own, with our social status, our reputation, or even our body. Instead, Socrates famously maintained that our true self is our soul. If I say that God is good for a man discuss virtue every day, and those other things about you hear me conversing and testing myself and others, for the unexamined life is not worth living for men, you will believe me, and even less, according to Socrates. Therefore, the true self for Socrates is that one is lived in the accordance of knowledge, wisdom, and virtue. The true self is a virtuous self, and it is not identified with the things that one owns, one's reputation, one's social status, and even one's body, but only the knowledge, wisdom, and virtue. And that's all for Socrates' personal perspective about self. Once again, I am Prince Clarence Lipogpog, and I thank you.
True wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand about life, ourselves, and the world around us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Earl Jasper G. Jerusalem, and I'm going to share to you about the philosophical perspective about the self. Now we're going to learn about the body soul, concept of the soul, and then the three types of soul, which is the number one, rational soul, number two, in the spirited soul, and then the number three is the appetitive soul. The rational soul is located in the head, which have the ability to think. It is the most superior and among the other two soul because it has the intellectual, and then the reasoning. And then it is also called the true self of a human person or the nature because it is the ability to have, to follow, to order, and then to know, and then to learn. Then this desire for reasoning. And then the spirited soul is located on the chest, which is to feel the emotions, like joy, happiness, sadness, fear, etc. Because it is our emotions. And what do you mean by spirited soul is the elegant nobility of the soul, which have the desire of honors. And then the last one is the appetitive soul. It is located in the abdomen of our body. Why? Because it is enable us to experience physical hunger, thirst, and then it has the desire, pleasure. According to the Plato, the appetitive soul is less than the other two because it is the hard-headed. Other than the spirited soul is an elegant and nobility, while the appetitive soul is opposite, which is why I'm going to show to you about the allegory of the chariot, which is the example of the three soul of given by the Plato. So, as you can see, the chariot is the rational soul, and then the black horse is the appetitive soul, and then the white horse is the spirited soul. It is also called the white horse, immortal horse, and then the black horse is the mortal horse. So, as you can see, the spirited soul is more of following orders of the rational souls other than the appetitive soul, because the appetitive soul is different. That's my presentation for today, and thank you.
Ignorance is the root and stem of every evil.
I'm Chris M. Palomares, and I will be reporting about the philosophical perspective about the self according to Aristotle. Aristotle said the soul is the essence of the self. Aristotle is a student of Plato. The body and soul are not two separate elements, but are one thing. The soul is simply the form of the body, and it is not capable of existing without the body. The soul is the which make a person a person. The soul is the essence of the self. He suggests that rational nature of the self is to lead a good, flourishing, and fulfilling life. Without the body, the soul cannot exist. The soul die along with the body. Aristotle suggested that anything with life has soul. His discussions about the self center on the kind of soul possessed by a man. He introduced the three kinds of soul. According to Aristotle, there are three kinds of soul. Three kinds of soul: vegetative soul, sentient soul, rational soul. Vegetative soul include the physical body that can grow. Vegetative soul is the for plant reproduction and growth. Sentient soul include the sensual desire, feelings, and emotions. Sentient soul is for animals' mobility and sensation. Rational soul is what makes a man human. It includes in the intellect that make man know and understand. Rational is for human thought and reflections. That's it for Aristotle idea about the self. Thank you.
Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom.
Good afternoon, everyone, especially to Sir Adinis. My topic for the day is Saint Augustine. The self from the perspective from the various philosophers. Augustine, the self has an immortal soul. A soul can live in this world without a body, for it's considered as unity of body and self. It's an important element of man which governs and defines himself with. We all know that we are created in image and likeness of God, for we are geared towards the good. As Augustine constructs a view of God that would to come dominate Western thinking, he also creates a new concept of individual identity, the idea of the self. This identity is achieved through a twofold process, self-realization, which leads to self-realization. Augustine argued that skeptics have no basis for claiming to know that there is no knowledge, and he believed that genuine human knowledge can be established with certainty. He believed reason to be a uniquely human cognitive capacity that comprehends detective truths and logical details. Saint Augustine was the bishop of Hippo no Anaba, Algeria from 369 to 430. A renowned theological, prolific writer, he was also a skilled preacher and rhetorician. He is the one Latin fathers of the formally recognized as Doctor of the Church. What can we learn from Saint Augustine? Augustine has also taught us the human race is united in sin of rebellion against God and cannot save itself. Those who have met Christ have learned that they must trust Him completely and not really in their own qualities or inheritance for their salvation.
Hello everyone, my name is Limutan Rob James and I will report a philosophical perspective about self according to Saint Augustine. Learning objectives. To learn about self through Saint Augustine. To learn about Saint Augustine. Augustine's sense of self is his relation to God, both in his recognition of God's love and his response to it, achieved through self-presentation and self-realization. Augustine believed one could not achieve inner peace without finding God's love. Theory of Saint Augustine. This theory is a development of the free will defense. Do not quote the free will defense as independent of the Augustine theodicy, as they are based on the same belief in the true anatomy. He based his theory on key biblical passages. Genesis 1-3, Romans 5:12-20. He also based it in two assumptions. First, evil is not from God. God's creation was faultless and perfect. Second, evil comes from within the world. In Augustine's version of the self, it is only possible to understand who a person is when they have understood how they stand in relation to God. And this is a central aspect of the self that Augustine exposes in this text. Augustine tells a story with himself as central character, and as a result, he struggles between the body and the soul as he seeks happiness assume a bigger importance as a kind of metaphor for the self. wh- which in Augustine's opinion can only be truly discovered through the recognition of God's love and man's response to that love. The Confession is the first autobiography in Western literature, but Augustine meant it to be far more than simply an account of his life. He wrote it during the first 3 years of his tenure as a bishop of Hippo. The word confession in the title implies not only that narrative will reveal intimate facts about the author, but also that it will be guided by the spirit of remorse and the praise of God.
Beauty grows in you to the extent that love grows, because charity itself is the soul's beauty.
Hello everyone, I'm Danilo B. Gumadlas Jr. from Group 1 Presenters. Today I'm going to tackle about Anthony de Melo's self-awareness. Anthony de Melo was a Jesuit priest born in Bombay, India in 1931. He is widely known for integrating Western and Eastern spirituality, and his work continues to have impact beyond his untimely death in 1987. He is the author of the best-selling masterpiece called Awareness, and he has been a major influence on some of our era's greatest spiritual teachers. According to Anthony de Melo, awareness is a nourishment for the soul in a humorous and digestible way. Anthony de Melo helps you understand yourself, the world in a way that will help you improve the quality of your life. And this is the example of his lines. I discovered something revolutionized my life. I become a new man. This is what I am going to share with you. So therefore, awareness is very most important of each of us, because awareness is to understand everything that's happening with us and outside of who we are. And others said, the unaware life is not worth living. So therefore, the only way that someone can be helped to you is by challenging your ideas. The only way to change is by changing your understanding. And that's all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is Rowa Gopong from Group 1. So this is also 8 lessons in awareness by Anthony de Melo. So first is wake up and become aware. So it means that be aware of what you are saying. Be aware of what you are doing. Be aware of what you are thinking. Be aware of how you're acting, because we are aware of where you're coming from, what your motives are. So the unaware life is not worth living. The unaware life is a mechanical life. It's not human, it's program condition. Second is become like a child. How sad if we pass through life and never see it was the eyes of a child, right? Third is be like an animal. So it means that, for example, addiction, neglecting the needs of our bodies, being too busy, distractions, feeling guilty. So, but a dog doesn't feel that, right? So it means that if you really enjoy life and the simple pleasure of the sense, you'd be amazed. You develop that extraordinary discipline of the animal. An animal will never overeat, right? Fourth, learn to die in order to live. So it means that I've often said to people that the way to really live is to die. The passport to living is to imagine yourself in your grave. Fifth is reprogram your mind. That's what learning is all about, where spiritually is concerned. Unlearning almost everything you've been taught, and a willingness to unlearn, to listen. Because to become aware, you have to be willing to unlearn everything you know or believe in true in order to grow. Because when we grow up, we are conditioned by our environment, our parents, family, friends, teachers, governments, religion. Everyone dictate us how we are supposed to live our life. The sixth is stop identifying with with the ego. It's not reality that matters, but what you are saying to yourself about it. 7 is happiness is about being content. You're never so full of yourself as when you are in pain. You are never so centered on yourself as when you are depressed. You never ready to forget yourself as when you are happy. Happiness releases you from self. It is suffering and pain and misery and depression that tie you to the self. Happiness is about being content, not seeking on trail after the other. We have a tendency to tie our happiness with achieving the next something. And last is detached to feel free. An attachment is a belief that without something you are not going to be happy. That's Anthony de Mello said. When you are open to learning new things, stop identifying with your ego and focus on being content with what you have what you have your long way into become aware and at easy with yourself and world around you. But there's a stone in your shoe still that we have to get rid of, an attachment to something that prevent you from feeling centered or perhaps more than.
And that's all. Thank you.